So the Galactic Empire controlled 1,000,000 star systems. 1,000,000. And I mean, entire planets existed solely to mine raw materials for Imperial shipyards. The brightest engineers in the galaxy, right? Conscripted, bribed, threatened into service, doesn't matter. They're all working around the clock in research facilities that stretched across whole moons. The Imperial military budget? It exceeded 10% of galactic GDP. 10%. So what'd they build with all of it? The same TIE fighter. For 23 years. The same Stormtrooper armor that couldn't stop a blaster bolt from a weapon that hadn't changed in centuries. Star destroyers that were, functionally, they're just bigger versions of ships the Republic had fielded during the Clone Wars. Now, you could say the Empire failed to innovate. That's the easy answer. And it's wrong. The Empire chose not to innovate. Deliberately. Systematically. As a matter of policy. And that choice, it killed over 1,000,000 of its own pilots. Here's the thing about technological stagnation under Imperial rule. It wasn't incompetence, wasn't budget constraints, wasn't even bureaucratic inertia, though, the Empire had plenty of that. The stagnation was ideological. Every identical TIE fighter rolling off the assembly line at Sinar Fleet Systems wasn't a failure of imagination. It was a success of control. To understand how the galaxy's most powerful government deliberately crippled its own military technology, you have to go back before the Empire even existed. Back to a man named Wilhuff Tarkin and the philosophy he was building on a backwater outer rim world called Eriadu. Around 32 BBY, the Republic still existed. Palpatine was still just a senator from Naboo. Tarkin's writing position papers on military procurement. Papers that had eventually reshaped galactic warfare. He's about 32 years old, ambitious, brilliant in a cold and calculating way, and absolutely convinced that the Republic's military thinking was fundamentally broken. His argument was elegant, seductive even. The Republic obsessed over capability metrics. How fast, how powerful, how accurate. But Tarkin believed they were measuring the wrong thing entirely. What matters, and this is his whole thing, isn't what a weapon can do. What matters is what people believe it can do. A warship that appears invincible? It serves strategic purposes even sitting idle in a hangar. 1,000 efficient patrol craft scattered across the galaxy? They inspire nothing. No fear, no submission, no order. This became the seed of everything that followed. Rule through the fear of force, not force itself. But here's what Tarkin never acknowledged, what he was constitutionally incapable of acknowledging. His philosophy served his vanity as much as it served strategy. Every policy paper positioned Wilhuff Tarkin as the architect of galactic order. And questioning the doctrine meant questioning the man. Tarkin's ego permitted no questions. That conflation, personal pride dressed up as military strategy, would eventually kill him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The Clone Wars changed everything and nothing. When war erupted in 22 BBY, the Republic scrambled. They had to build a military from scratch. Kuat drive yards delivered the first Venator-class star destroyers within months. 1,137 meters of capital ship firepower. Crew of 7,400. Starfighter capacity, 420 mixed craft. Remember that number, 420. The Venator was designed around this simple assumption: pilots matter. Starfighters are decisive combat assets, not disposable screening elements. Skilled aviators require sophisticated craft with shield generators and life support, and the ability to retreat when a fight turns bad. The Republic invested in its pilots because pilots who survived became veterans, and veterans won wars. The Empire would reject every single one of these assumptions. In 21 BBY, while the Clone Wars still raged, Sinar Fleet Systems received a contract for a new interceptor design, the twin ion engine concept, what had eventually become the TIE fighter. The original specifications, designated internally as the V-Wing Interceptor Successor Program, document number SFSAPD 7734, called for a high-performance short-range interceptor with standard protective systems, deflector shields rated Class 1.5, life support with 48 hours of operational capacity, a Class 4 hyperdrive, an ejection system with emergency beacon, estimated pilot survival rate in catastrophic damage scenarios, 34%. 1 in 3 pilots would survive getting shot down. That was the design goal. By the time the TIE fighter entered mass production, that survival rate had been engineered down to 0. The transformation happened in 18 BBY, 1 year after Palpatine declared himself Emperor. Sienar Fleet Systems engineers presented their refined specifications to Imperial Naval Command on Coruscant. The prototype still had shields, reduced to Class 0.5 but present, emergency life support with 6-hour capacity, a backup ion engine, an ejection system. Based on procurement records and Imperial doctrine, analysts believe what happened next probably unfolded something like this. An engineering lead presented the shield generator specifications. The Class 0.5 system added 12% to unit cost, but increased pilot survivability by approximately 340% in standard engagement scenarios. 340%. That's not a rounding error. That's the difference between a pilot going home and a pilot burning up in the vacuum. A senior procurement officer interrupted. Survivability metrics are not the relevant consideration. The engineer paused. Sir, the loss of trained pilots represents a significant... And then a flag officer spoke the words that had echoed through 20 years of pilot deaths. Okay, so here's the thing. A pilot who knows he can survive, he fights cautious. He thinks about it. A pilot who knows he can escape, he's already thinking retreat, right? But a pilot who knows he's going to die unless he wins, that pilot, he fights. That's the aggression the Empire wanted. That's what they needed. So remove the other options. Make it so survival only happens if you win. That's it. The engineering team, they exchange looks. One guy opens his mouth. He's about to say something, and his colleague just grabs his arm under the table. Doesn't even have to say anything. The specs got approved. No deflector shields. And look, no life support either. The pilots would have to wear fully sealed flight suits just to breathe. No hyperdrive. No ejection system. Nothing. If the fighter got hit bad, we're talking catastrophic damage. Pilot survivability was, and I'm not being dramatic here, 0%. Literally 0. Unit cost, 60,000 credits. The version with shields, that'd be 150,000. So you're saving 90,000 per fighter. 90,000. And what's that really the price of? A pilot's life. That's what 90 grand meant. Fast forward 2 decades. The Imperial records, they're actually pretty clear about this, show pilot attrition rates that, when you extrapolate that across production numbers, you're looking at somewhere between 800,000 and 1.4 million pilots dead. Those are conservative numbers. Like, most of those deaths, they happened in combat scenarios where if they just had shields, if they just had basic deflectors, those pilots would have made it home. Every single one. Traces back to that room, that meeting, that decision right there to choose ideology over human lives. And here's what gets me. It wasn't about money. The Empire could afford shields. They could afford ejection seats. They could have done it. They chose not to, because expendable pilots actually serve the doctrine better. Better than pilots who could survive. So, 17 BBY rolls around, and Tarkin's philosophy reaches its final form, right? He publishes this document, Imperial Doctrine Paper, on the rule of the galaxy, and the Emperor himself endorses it personally, the Tarkin Doctrine. This thing established 3 principles that basically governed military development for an entire generation. First, rule through fear. The Empire doesn't need to actually deploy overwhelming force everywhere. The threat of it existing, the certainty that they'll deploy it if they have to, that maintains order. So you invest resources in weapons that look terrifying, that scare people, not in equipment that's actually tactically effective. Second, and this is kind of chilling when you think about it, expendability. Personnel, equipment, everything has to be infinitely replaceable. If you create systems where pilots or engineers or commanders become irreplaceable, where they become specialists, that's a vulnerability. That's weakness. Third, standardization. Non-standard equipment means non-standard operators. Non-standard operators develop their own methods, their own way of doing things. And independent methods become independent thought. The Empire's whole uniformity, it's not just efficient. They believed it was necessary, ideologically necessary. Read that again if you need to. They actually believed standardization prevented independent thought. So every TIE fighter built the exact same way meant every pilot was interchangeable. Every Star Destroyer following identical blueprints meant any captain could be moved around or removed without anything breaking. Innovation? That was dangerous. That created specialists, created people who couldn't be replaced, created power centers outside the direct chain of command. So the Empire crushed it. Wherever innovation showed up, they crushed it. The Imperial-class Star Destroyer comes online in 14 BBY. Just compare it to the Venator it replaced, and you'll see what I mean. Length goes from 1,137 meters to 1,600. That's 41% bigger. Crew? It balloons. We're talking 7,400 to 37,085. 5 times the people. Primary weapons jump from 8 turbolasers to 60. But starfighter capacity? It drops from 420 down to 72. 83% reduction. And here's the crazy part. The Imperial class wasn't designed to win battles. It was designed to prevent battles through intimidation. The crew number is absurd inefficiency. I mean that. The Venator could do 80% of what the Imperial class does with 20% of the crew. But the Imperial class? It looks invincible. When that silhouette comes down through the atmosphere, that communicates absolute power. That was the entire point. Looking dangerous mattered more than being effective. The starfighters got cut not because they forgot to include them. It was doctrine, made physical. Pilots were expendable, screening elements, not decisive. The Empire wouldn't invest in systems that made pilots matter. But some engineers, not everyone agreed with this. In 11 BBY, there's this faction inside Scianar Fleet Systems developing advanced TIE variants anyway, against official policy. The TIE Advanced X1 prototype. It had everything the standard TIE didn't have. Deflector shield generator, class 1.0. Hyperdrive. Enhanced life support. Better solar panels. 34% more power output. An ejection system with emergency beacon. Everything. Unit cost, 150,000 credits. 2.5 times what the standard TIE cost. Naval Procurement Command? Rejected it. They said the reasoning was cost inefficiency. But, and this is the thing, internal memos tell the actual story. The TIE Advanced creates a class of elite pilots whose survival and accumulated experience would generate demands for further equipment improvements. This represents an unacceptable pressure on standardization doctrine. So the Empire's choice? Build 25 standard TIEs for every 1 TIE Advanced they could have produced. 25 pilots dead for every one who might have survived. Only a handful of TIE Advanced units ever get made. Vader flew one at Yavin. That's it. No regular pilot ever got one. The technology existed. The Empire just refused to use it. Okay, now, the Death Star. The battle station, right? The thing that basically defined everything the Empire was and everything they'd fail at? It started as a lie. A complete lie. 15 BBY. Director Orson Krennic recruits this physicist, Galen Erso. Specializes in Kyber crystal energy. His whole doctoral work at the Brentall Futures program, it was about harnessing Kyber resonance as a power source. Unlimited, clean power. His vision was humanitarian, you know? If we can tap into kyber energy, we can power entire worlds. Worlds burning fossil fuels, desalinate oceans, end energy poverty across the outer rim. And Krennic tells him Project Celestial Power will do exactly that. So Urso believes it. For years. He actually believes it. Even as his research gets funneled directly into super laser development. Even as the weapon that'd destroy Alderaan takes shape around equations he wrote. Even then, he's still believing. So Krennic needed Urso, right? Because nobody else could actually solve the super laser's energy focusing problems. But here's where the ego comes in. If Krennic admitted he needed someone, that would have completely undermined his whole "I'm indispensable" thing. And he couldn't have that. So every progress report? His leadership. Every setback? Subordinate's fault. The weapon that would reshape the galaxy. In Krennic's mind, that's his weapon. And this delusion just keeps going until Tarkin shows up and takes the whole project away from him. Just like that. In 13 BBY, Urso gets unauthorized access to these project files. Files talking about destroying entire planets. And he basically nopes out, takes his family, disappears into the outer rim. But, and this is the thing, his work was already far enough along. The super laser could function without him. Wouldn't be perfect, but it'd work. The Empire got what they needed. But Urso wasn't actually done. When Krennic drags him back in 6 BBY, Urso does something remarkable. He complies. He finishes the whole design. And then, this is insane, he builds a flaw into it. So elegant, so perfect that nobody catches it. Not until way, way too late. The thermal exhaust port. 2 meters. That's it. Direct line to the main reactor. And if you hit it, if someone fires just one proton torpedo at exactly the right angle, chain reaction. Entire station goes boom. Urso did that on purpose. Deliberately. He's betting his life, his family's safety, literally the fate of the entire galaxy, on the chance that someone in the rebellion actually finds this flaw and knows what to do with it. So that's the thing, right? That's the whole ego clash at the center of the Death Star. Tarkin thinks his philosophy can't fail. Krennic thinks his project makes him indispensable. And Urso, he figures his genius can outsmart both of them. Urso was right. He was. But it costs him everything. His wife dies. His daughter gets pulled into a war she never wanted. He beats the Empire, but at the cost of literally everything that mattered to him. Tarkin? He was wrong. Dead wrong. Literally. At the Battle of Yavin, right? 0 BBY. His officers come to him and tell him the rebels found a weakness. And Tarkin just refuses to evacuate. He stands on the bridge of his own creation and watches this attack coming, and he's absolutely certain, 100%. His doctrine can't fail. Because the Death Star isn't just a weapon. It's the Tarkin doctrine made real. Terror as strategy. A weapon so overwhelming that nobody would dare resist. He's betting everything on that. A farm boy from Tatooine fires 2 proton torpedoes into that 2-meter exhaust port. Tarkin dies. His doctrine dies with him. Though, the effects stick around for years. But the core of it? Dead. Here's the crazy part, though. The rebellion's biggest advantage wasn't more resources, wasn't even better engineers. The Alliance is literally operating on scraps, flying these mismatched fleets they stole or salvaged or bought on the black market. Their advantage? Freedom. Alliance engineers could actually experiment. They could fail, iterate, improve, without worrying they'd get executed for a bad idea. And that's why the X-Wing beats the TIE Fighter. And it does, don't get me wrong. Because it's designed around pilot survival, around adaptability. Things the Empire literally can't comprehend. X-Wings have shields, life support, hyperdrives so pilots can actually leave and fight another day. Yeah, they cost way more than a TIE Fighter. But X-Wing pilots? They live. They become veterans. And veteran pilots win wars. The rebellion can't just throw bodies away like the Empire does. That constraint, right? Actually having to keep your people alive, it forces the Alliance into better engineering. The Empire, though, their resources are basically unlimited. They could replace pilots, ships, weapons, whatever. And that abundance makes them lazy. Why innovate when you can just build more of the same? Why protect pilots when you can just recruit more? Same TIE fighter design. Battle of Yavin, 0 BBY. Battle of Endor, 4 ABY. 4 years. And nothing. No real improvements. No shields. No life support. Still just a 60,000 credit coffin with a seat in it. The Empire learned nothing. Couldn't learn anything. The doctrine doesn't allow for it. When the second Death Star explodes over Endor, it's not just a military loss. It's proof. Actual proof that you can't rule through terror. That making everything identical makes you brittle, not strong. That if you treat your own people like they're disposable, eventually you run out of people willing to die for you. The Empire had resources beyond belief, incomprehensible amounts, and they used them to build monuments to their own ideology instead of weapons that actually work. Technological stagnation, right? That's not a mistake. That's intentional. The Emperor doesn't want a galaxy that can innovate and escape his control. He wants a frozen galaxy, terrified, dependent on him, incapable of developing any alternative. Every single identical TIE fighter, that's a monument to that ambition. Every pilot who dies in an unshielded cockpit, that's a sacrifice to the doctrine. And every engineer who stays quiet, who approves specifications they know will kill people, they're part of the system. The Empire didn't fall because it lacked technology. It fell because it created a system where questioning anything is career suicide, where ego matters way more than facts, where the guys in charge are so convinced they're brilliant that they can't see the failures until the failures kill them. Tarkin dies believing he can't be wrong. He was. And hey, if you want more stories like that, subscribe.